The colony of New Montana was burning. Admiral Katie Munro stood on the bridge of the USS Relentless, watching the footage that had traveled 4 light years to reach her. The images showed smoke rising from wheat fields that had taken 20 years to grow. Buildings collapsed into rubble. Streets filled with bodies that no one would ever bury. She had seen war before. She had lost friends and soldiers under her command. But this was different. This was not a battle. This was a harvest. The Valorians had come without warning. Their ships descended on a peaceful farming colony at dawn, when children were walking to school and parents were drinking their morning coffee. The insectoid aliens did not come to conquer or demand surrender. They came to collect. To the Valorians, other species were not people. They were resources. Their bodies contained biological compounds that powered Valorian technology. For centuries, they had harvested dozens of species across the galaxy, and no one had stopped them. The Galactic Coalition looked the other way because the Valorians were powerful, and power made its own rules. New Montana had housed 2.3 million humans. Farmers who grew food for a dozen colonies. Teachers who educated the next generation. Doctors who healed the sick. Children who dreamed of exploring the stars someday. When the Valorian ships finally left, only 14,000 survivors remained. They hid in underground bunkers, listening to the screams above until the screams stopped. Katie watched the footage again. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, crying in a destroyed street. She called for her mother over and over. Her mother would never answer. The Admiral's hands trembled. Not from fear. From rage. 4 light years away, on the great station that housed the Galactic Council, Ambassador Ben Hartley stood before representatives of 100 species. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 30 years as a diplomat, believing that patience and reason could solve any problem. Today, his faith was being tested. 2.3 million people, he said, his voice steady but cold. Murdered. Harvested like cattle. And what does this council propose to do about it? The Valorian ambassador, a creature with 6 legs and compound eyes that showed no emotion, clicked its mandibles. The Dominion exercised its legal rights under the Treaty of Vexnar. The colony was within our expansion zone. We acted within the law. Ben felt sick. The treaty was 300 years old, written when the Valorians were at the height of their power. It gave them the right to utilize biological resources in any system they claimed. The other species had agreed because they were afraid, because it was easier to sacrifice others than to fight. They were not resources, Ben said. They were people. They were our people. The council voted. Species after species pressed their buttons, casting their decisions into the great tally. When the numbers appeared, Ben stared at them in disbelief. The motion to sanction the Valorian Dominion had failed. 63 against. 31 in favor. 6 abstained. The council has spoken, the presiding official announced. The matter is closed. Ben Hartley walked out of the chamber without another word. He had dedicated his life to peace, to cooperation, to the belief that civilization could triumph over barbarism. Now he understood the truth. The galaxy did not want justice. The galaxy wanted comfort. And comfort meant looking away when monsters fed. He contacted Earth immediately. The United Earth government convened within hours. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, scientists and citizens gathered in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth was represented in a single vote. The debate lasted only 40 minutes. Some argued for caution. The Valorians had conquered 47 species. Their fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. Humanity had only been a spacefaring civilization for 2 centuries. The math seemed impossible, but then they showed the footage. The burning fields, the empty streets, The little girl crying for her mother. The vote was unanimous. Every nation, every representative, every voice. Humanity declared war. The declaration was broadcast across every frequency the galaxy used. It was translated into 1,000 languages and sent to every corner of known space. It was simple and direct, written not by diplomats but by soldiers who understood what was coming. To the Valorian Dominion and all who stand with them. You attacked our people without warning. You murdered our children without mercy. You believed we were weak because we chose peace. You were wrong. We chose peace because we know what we become when we choose war. Now, you will learn. We are coming for you. Not for territory. Not for resources. For justice. And we will not stop until we have it. Across the galaxy, species that had watched humans for a century were confused. The humans were supposed to be the friendly ones. The emotional ones. The species that made art and music and talked about feelings. They were not supposed to be dangerous. The Valorians were not worried. They had crushed greater empires than Earth. They began mobilizing a fleet of 10,000 ships to end the human problem once and for all. On the bridge of the USS Relentless, Admiral Katie Munro received the Council's decision and Earth's response within minutes of each other. She read the declaration of war 3 times. Captain Derek Powell stood beside her. He was a younger man with steady hands and calm eyes. He had served under Katie for 5 years and had never seen her show fear. "Orders, Admiral?" he asked. Katie looked at the footage one more time. The little girl had finally stopped crying. She sat alone in the rubble, holding a torn piece of cloth that might have been her mother's dress. "Prepare the fleet," Katie said. "We have a war to win." She turned off the screen, but kept the image in her mind. She would carry it with her through every battle, every decision, every sleepless night. She would carry it until the people who did this answered for their crimes. The galaxy had lived by one rule for too long. The strong take what they want, and the weak suffer. Humanity was about to write a new rule. No one touches our children. No one. The galaxy did not understand what it had awakened. For 112 years, humanity had played a role. They smiled at diplomatic meetings. They shared their music and their art. They talked about peace and cooperation. They let other species believe they were soft, emotional, and harmless. It was all true. Humans did love peace. They did make beautiful art. They did feel deeply and care about others. But there was another side to humanity. A side they had hidden from the galaxy. A side born from 10,000 years of war against themselves. General Scott Rhea sat in the command center beneath the Swiss Alps, surrounded by screens showing military installations across the solar system. He was 63 years old, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had hoped to retire without ever giving the order he was about to give. "Activate Protocol Omega," he said. Across the solar system, things began to wake up. On Mars, factory complexes that had been officially listed as abandoned mining facilities powered on for the first time in decades. Robots that had waited in darkness began to move. Assembly lines that could produce a warship every 3 days started rolling. On Europa, beneath the ice, shipyards that no alien had ever seen began opening their doors. Hundreds of vessels emerged from the frozen moon, ships that the galaxy did not know existed. In the asteroid belt, weapons platforms that looked like ordinary mining stations activated their targeting systems. Each one could destroy a capital ship from half a solar system away. Humanity had prepared for this day. They had smiled and made friends, but they had never forgotten the lessons of their own history. Civilizations that could not defend themselves did not survive. So while they talked about peace, they built the tools for war. Just in case. Dr. Megan Cho stood before the military council, presenting the results of 30 years of secret research. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair and glasses that she constantly adjusted when she was nervous. She was very nervous now. "Project Prometheus," she said, bringing up images on the screen. "Everything we developed but never revealed to the Coalition." The generals watched in silence as she showed them weapons that made nuclear bombs look like toys. Kinetic impactors that could crack a planet's crust. Computer viruses that could eat an enemy's artificial intelligence in minutes. Biological agents designed for specific alien physiologies. Energy shields that could withstand direct hits from the most powerful weapons known to the galaxy. "Why didn't we share this technology?" one general asked. Megan adjusted her glasses. "Because we were afraid. Not of the aliens. Of ourselves. We remember what we did to each other with far less power. We decided that some knowledge was too dangerous to spread." General Reyes nodded slowly. "And now? Now we use it. All of it. Whatever it takes to win." Lieutenant Commander Tyler Brooks was next. He was young for his rank, only 35, with the kind of mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos. He specialized in tactics, and he had spent his entire career studying how humans fought wars. "The aliens don't understand how we fight," he explained. "Most species follow rules. They have honor codes. They negotiate. They accept surrender. They believe that war should be civilized." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Humans don't fight that way. When we go to war, we aim to win. Completely. Totally. We use every advantage. We exploit every weakness. We don't stop until the enemy cannot fight anymore. Our ancestors learned this through thousands of years of fighting each other. We know what real war looks like." The council was silent. They all knew their history. The world wars. The genocides. The nuclear standoffs. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times. That trauma had taught them to value peace, but it had also taught them how to wage war with terrible efficiency. Chief Engineer Lisa Tran reported on the military buildup. She was a practical woman who spoke in numbers and facts. "We are converting every ship that can hold a weapon. Cargo freighters are becoming troop transports. Mining vessels are being fitted with bomb bays. Even civilian yachts are receiving railgun installations. In 3 months, we will have a fleet of 15,000 combat-capable vessels. The Valorians have 10,000 ships coming for us," General Reyes said. Lisa smiled for the first time. "Good. We want them to think they have enough." Across Earth, the response was unlike anything in human history. There were no protests against the war. No political divisions. No arguments about whether they should fight. New Montana had unified humanity in a way that nothing else ever had. Recruitment centers opened in every city, and lines stretched around the block. Young people who had never held a weapon signed up to learn. Old veterans who had retired decades ago came back to train the new soldiers. Scientists who had spent their lives in laboratories volunteered to work on military projects. Factory workers took double shifts to build more ships, more weapons, more supplies. A grandmother in Texas converted her small business into a uniform factory. A teenager in Japan wrote software that improved targeting systems by 15%. A retired teacher in Nigeria organized supply convoys for the military bases. Everyone found a way to help. They were not fighting for glory or conquest. They were fighting because the Valorians had shown them what happened when evil went unopposed. They were fighting because somewhere out there, children were still crying for parents who would never come home. Intelligence reports came in daily. The Valorian fleet was massive and confident. Their commanders boasted openly about how quickly they would crush the human resistance. Some predicted the war would last only weeks. They spoke of humanity the way a farmer speaks of insects in his field. A minor problem to be eliminated, General Reyes read every report carefully. He studied the enemy's tactics, their technology, their psychology. He learned that the Valorians had never lost a war. They had conquered 47 species without ever tasting defeat. He called a meeting of his top commanders, including Admiral Katie Munro, who had returned from the outer colonies to lead the main fleet. They gathered around a holographic map showing the approaching enemy armada. "They outnumber us," Reyes said. "They outgun us. They have more experience. By every measure, they should win." The commanders waited. "But they have never fought humans before. They think this will be easy. They think we are just another soft species waiting to be harvested." He looked at each of them in turn. "Show them how wrong they are." Katie Munro stepped forward. Her eyes were hard, and her voice was steady. "They want to come to our home and take our people. Let them come. We will meet them at the gate, and we will make them regret every step they took toward our stars." The fleet began moving toward Proxima Centauri, where the enemy would arrive first. 15,000 human ships against 10,000 Valorian warships. The numbers favored the enemy, but numbers were not everything. The Valorians had technology and experience. Humanity had rage, desperation, and absolutely nothing to lose. They would fight to the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath. Because behind them was Earth. Behind them were their children, and nobody was going to touch them again. The Valorian armada arrived at Proxima Centauri like a swarm of metal locusts. 10,000 ships filled the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming with the cold light of distant stars. At their center flew the flagship of War Queen Zixthrol, a vessel the size of a small moon. Bristling with weapons that could glass a planet in hours, the War Queen surveyed the human fleet from her command chamber. Her compound eye saw everything at once, processing information faster than any human brain could manage. She had conquered 12 species personally. She had never known defeat. The humans had assembled their forces near the Proxima Gate, the jump point that led directly to Earth's solar system. Their fleet was larger than she expected, nearly 15,000 vessels, but most of them were clearly converted civilian ships. Mining freighters, transport barges, even pleasure yachts with hastily attached weapons. She clicked her mandibles in amusement. These creatures were desperate. Desperate prey was easy prey. "Broadcast the surrender terms," she ordered. Her message went out across all frequencies. "Humans of Earth, you have shown courage by standing against the Dominion. This courage is noted but meaningless. Surrender now, and your harvest will be quick and painless. Resist, and we will take our time. You have 1 hour to decide." Admiral Katie Munro received the message on the bridge of her command ship. Around her, officers waited for her response. Some were veterans who had served for decades. Others were young recruits who had never seen combat. All of them were afraid. All of them were ready. "Lieutenant Santos," Katie said calmly, "open a channel to the Valorian flagship." Nick Santos, her communications officer, nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Katie straightened her uniform and looked directly at the camera. "War Queen Zixthrol, this is Admiral Katie Munro of the United Earth Fleet. I have received your terms." She paused for exactly 3 seconds. "This is my response." She turned to her tactical officer. "Launch all fighters. Begin attack pattern Omega." The human fleet exploded into motion. Commander Amy Vasquez led the first wave of fighters toward the Valorian formation. She was 32 years old and had never killed anyone in her life. Today, that would change. She had made peace with it during the long journey to Proxima. "All pilots, remember your training," she said over the com. "Stay in formation until we reach their defensive line, then break and engage individual targets. Priority is the command vessels. If you get a clear shot at the flagship, take it. "Commander," one of her pilots asked, "what if we don't make it back?" Amy thought about her mother back on Earth, her younger sister who had just started university, the cat that would wait by the window for her every evening. "Then we make sure our deaths mean something," she said. "For New Montana." "For New Montana," the pilots repeated. The fighters screamed toward the Valorian line at speeds that would have killed any unaugmented human. They weaved through defensive fire, losing ships with every second but never slowing down. The Valorians had expected the humans to form battle lines like civilized species. Instead, the humans attacked like wolves, targeting weak points and exploiting gaps with terrifying precision. War Queen Zix Thrall watched in growing confusion. This was not how wars were fought. Where were the formal challenges? Where were the negotiated boundaries? These humans simply attacked everything, everywhere, all at once. "They fight without honor," she hissed. Her tactical advisor clicked nervously. "They fight to win, my queen." The battle raged for hours. Human ships fell by the hundreds, but for everyone that died, they took 2 or 3 Valorians with them. The converted mining ships proved surprisingly deadly, their industrial cutting lasers slicing through enemy armor like paper. The transport barges carried thousands of small drones that swarmed over Valorian vessels, blocking sensors and jamming communications. Captain Derek Powell commanded the USS Relentless from the heart of the chaos. His ship had taken heavy damage, but it was still fighting. Around him, his crew worked with desperate efficiency, putting out fires and rerouting power while still maintaining combat operations. "Captain," his first officer reported, "the War Queen's flagship is exposed. Their escort ships have been drawn into the main battle." Derek looked at the tactical display. The path to the flagship was open, but it was also a one-way trip. The amount of firepower surrounding that vessel meant that anything that got close would be destroyed. He made his decision in less than a second. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency evacuation. We are going to ram the enemy flagship." There was a moment of silence. Then his crew began moving to the escape pods. No one argued. No one refused. They understood what had to be done. "It has been an honor serving with all of you," Derek said over the intercom. "Now get off my ship." "That's an order." The USS Relentless accelerated toward the Valorian flagship at maximum speed. Derek stayed at the helm, guiding his dying ship toward its target. He thought about his wife, waiting for news back on Earth. He thought about the children at New Montana, who would never grow up. The Valorians poured everything they had into stopping him. But the Relentless kept coming. Its armor melted. Its systems failed. Its hull began to break apart. Still it came. War Queen Zix Thrall realized too late what was happening. She ordered evasive maneuvers, but a ship the size of a moon could not turn quickly. She watched the human vessel, now little more than a burning wreck, slam into her flagship. Relativistic speeds. The explosion was visible from Earth. The chain reaction destroyed the War Queen's flagship and 200 ships around it. The Valorian command structure shattered in an instant. Panic spread through their fleet as officers who had never made decisions alone suddenly found themselves in charge. The humans pressed their advantage with savage determination. Ships that should have retreated for repairs instead charged deeper into enemy formations. Pilots who had used all their missiles rammed their fighters into Valorian engines. A cargo freighter named the Prairie Wind positioned itself between the main fleet and a Valorian battlecruiser, absorbing the killing blow meant for the human flagship. After 17 hours, the battle ended. The Valorian armada, or what remained of it, fled into hyperspace. They had lost 60% of their forces. For the first time in their species' recorded history, they had been defeated in open battle. The human fleet had lost nearly 5,000 ships. 40,000 soldiers were dead or missing. The cost was almost beyond measuring, but they had won. Admiral Katie Monroe stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship, looking at the debris field that stretched across the system. Somewhere out there was what remained of the USS Relentless and Captain Derek Powell, who had given everything so that others might live. "Lieutenant Santos," she said quietly, "open a channel to the retreating fleet." The channel opened. Katie spoke clearly, making sure every Valorian would hear her words. "Tell your masters what happened here today. Tell them about the ships that rammed your vessels. Tell them about the pilots who flew into your guns without hesitation. Tell them that this is what humans do when you threaten our home." She paused. "And tell them we are just getting started." Across the galaxy, species that had considered humanity a minor power watched the battle recordings in disbelief. These emotional creatures, these artists and dreamers, had just broken the greatest military force in known space. The Valorians had taken 2.3 million human lives at New Montana. Today, humanity had collected the first part of the debt. The Valorians expected humanity to rest after the battle. They expected the humans to negotiate, to demand compensation, to declare victory and go home. That was how civilized species behaved after winning a battle. Humanity did not rest. 3 weeks after Proxima Gate, human fleets struck 12 Valorian systems simultaneously. The enemy had barely begun to reorganize their forces when soldiers in Earth uniforms were landing on their colony worlds. General Scott Reyes coordinated the campaign from the command center on Earth, managing logistics across hundreds of light years. He had not slept more than 4 hours at a time since the war began. His doctors warned him about his health. He ignored them. He would rest when the war was over. Major Chris Donovan led the ground forces on Valorian Prime 7, a world that had served as a labor camp for dozens of conquered species. His troops moved through the alien city with careful precision, clearing buildings and searching for survivors. They found them in underground chambers that stretched for miles. Thousands of beings from species the galaxy had written off as extinct. They had been kept alive for generations, bred like cattle, harvested slowly so the supply would never run out. When the liberation forces opened the chamber doors, the prisoners did not believe what they were seeing. Many had been born in captivity. They had never seen the sky or known that freedom existed. A ka, creature that looked like a cross between a bear and an octopus, approached Chris slowly. Its body was covered in scars from years of harvesting. Its eyes, once bright blue, had faded to gray. "You are human," it said in broken standard language. "We heard stories. We did not believe. We thought no one would ever come." Chris removed his helmet so the creature could see his face. "We came. We're here now. You're free." The creature made a sound that might have been crying. Others gathered around, touching the human soldiers as if to confirm they were real. After generations of darkness, the light had finally arrived. The liberation footage was broadcast across the galaxy. Ambassador Ben Hartley used it to turn public opinion against the Valorians. Species that had supported the Dominion for centuries suddenly discovered their conscience. Trade embargoes collapsed the Valorian economy. Vassal states that had been too afraid to rebel saw their chance and took it. The Dominion was falling apart, and humanity was pushing harder with each passing day. But the war was far from over. The Valorians still had resources. They still had ships. They still had the will to fight. Prime Emperor Vexenor, the supreme ruler of the Dominion, declared that every Valorian would die before they surrendered to the humans. Dr. Megan Cho worked day and night in her laboratory on Luna, searching for a way to end the war quickly. She had access to every piece of biological data humanity had collected about the Valorians. She understood their physiology better than their own doctors did. After months of work, she created it. A pathogen tailored specifically to Valorian biology. It would spread through their population like wildfire, destroying them from the inside. Within a year of release, the Valorian species would cease to exist. She stared at the small vial in her hand for a long time. Such a small thing. Such enormous power. She requested an immediate meeting with General Reyes. The general looked tired when she arrived. The war had aged him years in just months. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and his uniform hung looser than it used to. But his mind was still sharp, and his authority was absolute. "What do you have, Doctor?" he asked. Megan placed the vial on his desk. "Victory. Complete and final. One deployment of this pathogen, and the Valorian species ends. No more fighting. No more human deaths. No more war." Reyes looked at the vial without touching it. "Genocide. Survival," Megan countered. "They started this. They killed our people. They've enslaved billions across the galaxy. They won't stop unless we make them stop permanently." Reyes was silent for a long moment. He thought about New Montana, about the 40,000 soldiers who had died at Proxima Gate, about the fathers and mothers who would never see their children again. Part of him wanted to grab that vial and launch it immediately. Part of him wanted revenge so badly that he could taste it, but he also thought about history, about the times humanity had given in to that same rage, about the atrocities they had committed against each other when they let hatred consume them, about the centuries it had taken to build a civilization that valued life over vengeance. "What do we become if we use this?" he asked quietly. Megan did not answer. She did not have an answer. "We fought this war because they murdered innocents," Reyes continued. "Because they treated other species as resources instead of people. If we exterminate them, how are we different? What do we tell our children about who we are?" "We tell them we won," Megan said, but her voice was uncertain now. "No, we tell them we became the monsters we fought against. We tell them that humanity, when pushed hard enough, chose genocide." He picked up the vial carefully. "I've lost too many soldiers to count. I dream about them every night. I want the Valorians to suffer for what they did. But this," he shook his head, "this is not who we are. This is not who we want to be." He handed the vial back to her. "Destroy it. Every sample, every note, every piece of research. I want it gone." Megan took the vial with trembling hands. Part of her was relieved. Part of her was angry. But she understood. They had to win this war without losing their souls. Instead of genocide, humanity offered terms. Unconditional surrender. War crime tribunals for those responsible for atrocities. Reparations to every species the Valorians had harmed. The complete dismantling of their military forever. They would be allowed to exist, but they would never threaten anyone again. Prime Emperor Vexenar refused. He broadcast defiant messages across the Dominion, calling for his people to fight to the last. But his people were tired. Their economy was destroyed. Their allies had abandoned them. Human fleets surrounded their remaining worlds, tightening the grip day by day. Finally, after 3 months of siege, Vexenar's own generals removed him from power. The new leadership accepted humanity's terms. The war was over. Humanity had won without becoming what they had fought against. They had chosen justice over vengeance, mercy over extermination. It was the harder choice, the longer path, the less satisfying victory, but it was the right one. On Luna, Megan Cho destroyed the pathogen as ordered. She watched the vial dissolve in the neutralization chamber, erasing months of work and the deaths of billions of potential victims. She felt empty and exhausted and somehow at peace. They had been pushed to the edge of darkness. They had looked into the abyss, and they had chosen to step back. That, more than any battle, was humanity's greatest victory. 1 year had passed since the war ended. the galaxy was transformed. The Valorian Dominion, once the most feared power in known space, existed only in history books. Their worlds were monitored by coalition peacekeepers. Their leaders sat in prison cells, awaiting trial for crimes against sentient life. Their military had been disbanded, their weapons destroyed, but humanity had not conquered them. Humanity had broken their power without breaking their spirit as a species. Valorian children still went to school. Valorian families still gathered for meals. They were allowed to live, to grow, to perhaps become something better than their ancestors thought. It was a peace built on justice rather than extermination. It was harder to maintain than a genocide would have been. It was the only peace worth having. Admiral Katie Monroe sat in a transport shuttle, watching the stars drift past her window. She wore civilian clothes for the first time in months. Her military uniform was packed away, waiting for a day she hoped would never come again. She was traveling to New Montana. The colony had been rebuilt. It would never be exactly what it was before. The original buildings were gone, the original streets erased. But new structures stood where the old ones had fallen. New fields grew where ash had covered the land. New families were making homes in the place where so many had died. Katie's younger brother, Ryan, was one of the new settlers. He had been a teacher on Earth before the war. When the fighting ended, he volunteered to help establish the new colony school. He wanted to teach children in the place where so many children had lost their lives. He met Katie at the landing pad with a hug that lasted longer than words could express. They had not seen each other since she left for Proxima Gate. He had watched the battle footage, knowing that any moment might show her ship exploding. He had prayed to gods he was not sure he believed in, and she had come home. "You look tired," Ryan said as they walked toward the new town. "I am tired," Katie admitted. "I've been tired for a year. I think I might be tired for the rest of my life." They walked in silence for a while, passing houses where lights glowed warmly in windows. Children played in yards, their laughter carrying across the evening air. None of them knew about the battle their arrival had cost. None of them understood the weight that Admiral Monroe carried. "What will you do now?" Ryan asked. Katie shrugged. "Rest, read some books. Maybe learn to cook something that doesn't come out of a military ration pack." She smiled weakly. "I honestly don't know. I've been fighting for so long that I forgot how to do anything else." Ryan squeezed her hand. "You'll figure it out. You always do." Far away, on the great station that housed the Galactic Council, Ambassador Ben Hartley stood before representatives of more than 100 species. The chamber was silent, waiting for him to speak. He had spent a year negotiating the new Galactic Charter. It had been the hardest diplomatic work of his life. Every species had their own interests, their own fears, their own demands. Getting them to agree on anything required patience, compromise, and occasionally threats that he delivered with a smile. But they had agreed. Finally, after endless debates, they had agreed. "The new charter is simple," Ben said. "No species may attack another without provocation. No species may enslave or harvest another. Any violation of these principles will be met with collective response from all members of the coalition." He paused. "And yes, that collective response will be led by Earth if necessary. We have proven what we are capable of. We hope we never have to prove it again." The vote was unanimous. No species dared oppose the humans. But it was more than fear that drove their decision. It was respect. Humanity had fought a terrible war and won. Then they had shown mercy to their defeated enemy. They had demonstrated both the strength to destroy and the wisdom to spare. That combination earned the galaxy's trust. President Linda Shaw addressed Earth and all of known space from the new memorial at New Montana. She stood before a wall carved with 2.3 million names, the complete list of everyone who had died in the original attack. "We did not seek this war," she said. "We did not want it. We were a peaceful species trying to find our place among the stars. But when evil came for our children, we answered. Not with speeches or negotiations, but with everything we had." She looked at the names behind her, each one representing a life cut short, a family destroyed, a future that would never be. "We won the war. But I am not here to celebrate victory. I am here to remember the cost. Every soldier who died at Proxima Gate, every pilot who flew into enemy fire, knowing they would not return, every family that sent their loved ones away and never saw them again. We carry them with us. We carry their sacrifice. And we promise that it was not in vain." Dr. Megan Cho watched the speech from a small memorial garden on Earth. She had not attended the official ceremonies. She did not feel comfortable being honored for work that had almost ended with genocide. A shadow fell across her, and she looked up to see a young Valorian standing nearby. The creature was barely an adult by their species standards, part of the first generation being raised without the old empire's ideology. "You are Dr. Cho," the Valorian said. "I have read about you. You created many of the weapons that defeated us." Megan tensed. "I did what was necessary." The Valorian clicked its mandibles in what might have been a nod. "My teacher says that humans had the power to destroy us completely. He says you chose not to. He says this is why we should learn to be different than our ancestors." It held out a small flower, grown in a garden on the station where Valorian students now studied alongside other species. "Thank you," the young Valorian said, "for not ending us, for giving us a chance to become something better." Megan took the flower with trembling hands. Tears ran down her cheeks. On New Montana, Katie Monroe walked through the rebuilt streets as the sun set over the new fields. She passed the school where Ryan taught, the hospital where doctors healed the sick, the playground where children laughed without fear. A little girl ran up to her, maybe 7 years old, with bright eyes and an excited smile. "You're Admiral Monroe from the videos. You're the one who saved us." Katie knelt down to look the child in the eyes. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who did what needed to be done. A lot of people helped. Soldiers and doctors and teachers and builders. Everyone who believed that what happened here should never happen again." The girl tilted her head. "But you're still a hero, right?" Katie thought about Captain Derek Powell, who had died ramming his ship into the enemy flagship. She thought about Commander Amy Vasquez, who had led her pilots into certain death. She thought about the 40,000 soldiers whose names were carved on memorials across Earth. "The heroes are the ones who aren't here anymore," she said. "I'm just someone who came back." That night, a message was broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy. It was not a threat or a demand. It was a promise, spoken in a voice that every species would remember. The stars are vast and full of darkness. There are predators who see the weak as prey. There are monsters who believe that might makes right. But there is also light. There is also hope. And there are those who will stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. We are humanity. We do not seek war, but we do not fear it. We do not desire power, but we will not let power be used to harm the innocent. We remember every crime. We honor every sacrifice. And we promise this to every species, great or small, strong or weak. You are not alone. If darkness comes for you, we will answer. If injustice threatens you, we will stand beside you. If anyone crosses the line that should never be crossed, they will face the same fury that ended the Valorian dominion. We are the boundary that cannot be crossed. We are the line in the void, and we remember everything.